going to see pictures of the Greenland ice cap. So Mark Seth Lender, thanks so much for coming on and telling us about what you have just experienced with the Greenland ice cap. And a lot of folks are so concerned about this sheet starting to melt. Now, we should also say you're a producer, of course, a photographer, an essayist, a lot of things. You do radio and you also work for a living on Earth. But let's start with how you became a photographer and why it is that you wanted to capture wildlife.
The photography was almost accidental. I've always taken pictures for my own pleasure, but what I found and what became integral to my work as a naturalist was that using a camera at relatively high speed, I shoot around 10 frames a second, I was able to turn the camera into a writer's notebook because it first of all worked as a mnemonic. It reminded me of what I'd seen, and when I had an idea, that idea would come back to me. But secondly, and in some ways more important, the human eye is relatively slow and non-discriminating. Animals are seeing the world and reacting to it very quickly. And when you're cutting up the action into frame by frame by frame at a very high rate like that, you're closer to their way of seeing, and you begin to see nuances of behavior that even the video won't capture.
You speak about this so romantically.
Yeah.
And you're an animal lover, but you can't have animals, you were telling me.
Well, I have a kind of asthma that's provoked by most animals, but in particular cats and horses. So my two favorite things on Earth, particularly cats, so I have to admire them from a distance.
So you take all these pictures. So this is your website, Mark Seth
Yes.
Lender.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start looking at the Greenland ice cap.
Sure.
And we'll look at the first picture, and you can see it right here. When did you go, and how did you get dropped there to take pictures of this?
I was with an outfit called Adventure Canada, and courtesy of them and the Canadian Tourism Commission, I was taken on this wonderful trip.
What is that? It looks like the surface of the moon.
Well, it might as well be, because it goes on for thousands of kilometers, just like that, with that rough and unforgiving surface. We changed out to a massive iceberg.
This must be huge.
That iceberg is the size of, that iceberg is considerably bigger than the Green in New Haven. It's probably about as large as Madison Square Park in New York City. That gives you an idea. Well, if you look closely in just slightly right of center of the photograph, there's a little boat,
yes,
which is around 25 feet long, and it's got a couple of guys in there, and they're fishing for halibut, and the halibut look like dots, and that mountain beside them is just that. And of course, most of it, somewhere between 7 and 9/10 of it, is underwater. So it's big.
And we talked about this, where
Yeah.
it's more as a sheet. It's 110,000 years old, maybe older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're worried, and just as we look at the striations and the different colors,
Mm-hmm.
what are the colors from?
Well, that blue color, this is Eternity Glacier, which is in a little fjord just off of the Kangerlussuaq Fjord, which is just below the ice cap. And that little glacier, you're seeing that blue color, and that's pretty much an unadulterated color. It's actually that Ceylon sapphire blue, is from the compression. This ice is made of snow, which is very highly compressed, and the density of it has it refract and reflect that color.
And it's very blue.
Very blue. It's a Ceylon sapphire blue. It really is that blue.
Now we see some sand or some silt.
Well, here we're back to the ice cap itself, and so you see the ice cap, the white of the sheet. You see in the near ground, next below that, sand, which is ground up from the bedrock, from the shield rock that's perhaps 4 billion years old, and then that dark area.
He says casually.
Yeah. And the dark area, which is really the interesting part, that's retreat. That's where there's actually ice, remelted ice there from the ice cap, and it's wetting its way through the silt because it's melting. It's melting.
Now, you were there, and as we look at these pictures, describe that. Does that go way high up?
That goes way high up. That's the front of a glacier, and you can see, and that sort of yellowish stuff at the bottom where the birds are flying, that's a chunk that's just fallen off. And
are you in a boat?
I'm in a boat. I'm in a small boat there. And that's a close-up of more blue ice.
Absolutely. I mean, you see the
Yeah.
boat in front of you there.
Yep,
When you're
the
out there,
boat
is it
there.
crowded
Yep.
at all? Are there a lot of folks?
No, there are very few, and it has its it has its perils. We were iced out of Frobisher Bay. We couldn't actually land in North
What does
America.
that mean? Because
Well,
it's
we
falling
crossed
into
from
the water?
Greenland. We crossed from Greenland out through Davis Strait, across Hudson Strait, and we then simply couldn't get in. There were most of the places we wanted to go to. There was so much ice that had broken away so quickly. A couple of boats tried. They got stuck. When I left, they were waiting for icebreakers.
Is it loud when one is there? Do you hear this?
It's occasionally loud. You'll hear
the
a
shearing
crack
off?
and the concussion of this huge piece of ice hitting the water when you're at a glacial front.
And
when
that
you're at
must cause a huge ripple
a,
in
you
the
don't
water?
want to get too close.
Tell me about, and you've recorded this yourself, the sound of the sheet in places melting.
It's not the sheet that you hear. You'll hear water rushing out from underneath, which you were referring to about the rate of melt. But the icebergs themselves, because they're made out of these icebergs, which are made from snowfall and are rolling down mountains and rolling off the Greenland ice sheet, which again is all snowfall ice, are compressed under their own weight. But because of the structure of a snowflake, they capture a lot of air. And so that air is still trapped even within the blue ice. And as the icebergs break off and they melt underneath when they meet the warmer seawater, they release that ancient atmosphere, which can be tens of thousands of years old.
Think about that.
And there's a
ancient
lot of it.
atmosphere.
Yes. Yeah.
What have you learned as a photographer? And you shoot wildlife, and now you've shot the Greenland ice cap. Do you feel very small as a human, that we have no control over what's going on? I mean, you're helping to map what is going on in the world, and we're worried about this there.
Well, it can be emotionally trying because I don't want to be the last person on the planet to see these things. I want to share them with people and bring it to them with the same emotional content and intensity that I feel them. But I don't want to be Pliny the Younger, who was standing across from Vesuvius when that eruption happened,
Yeah,
and he thought it was the end of the world. And of course, for the people at Herculaneum and at Pompeii, it was. And I don't want to be that guy.
You've brought us this. You
So-
also do work for Living on Earth. You've written the Salt Marsh Diary.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
That's a collection of essays, both from my radio work and when I wrote for the Shoreline Times before it died and was reborn, and now I'm back there again. I'm writing for them now. An occasional piece here and there. And at that paper, I was able to hone my craft into relatively short, very poetic, very emotive pieces that I write and that go with the photographs that I do.
So what's next for you on the scale of the Greenland ice cap that you're going to bring us? And can we keep up to date on your website, Mark Seth Lender?
Yes, you can. When I'm here to update it.
I know it's death by blogging. I know.
Yeah, no.
But
I try.
What is there that you want to capture on camera that you'll bring us? That's just awesome.
Well, I like to see relational material. When animals relate to each other and I catch something in their behavior that hasn't been seen before, or that at least I haven't seen before, when they look at me and they make direct eye contact, and I can feel and interpret what they're doing in a meaningful way, that means a lot to me, and the camera helps with that a lot.
And what's coming up? I see a lot on your schedule for 2014.
A great deal. I'm going to, within days, I just came back from Saskatchewan, from the grasslands, which is a postage stamp of a park and a fabulous place, absolutely fabulous. We were surrounded by the entire bison herd there 3 times, and rattlesnakes and all kinds of stuff up close that I've been after for a long time, wanted to see and get to know. And I'm on my way now to Alberta. We'll be driving virtually across the province from Calgary up to Edmonton and visiting many areas with wildlife, with moose. We'll be looking for wolves to record their howls. We'll be going into areas serendipitously, hoping to find some of the large elk, the wapiti, and the woodland bison which are the only pure herd, or the original pure herd that survived the extermination, is at a place called Elk Island, which is not really an island in that sense, but it's in Alberta. And then from there to British Columbia, where the principal objective will be bears fishing for salmon and eagles, and above all, orca. And I plan to be out in small boats and make hydrophone recordings and get to know them a little.
I can't wait to see all this. I appreciate somebody like yourself out there taking the landscape and showing it to us, who we're not going to get to the Greenland ice cap, so I appreciate that very much. And to help us better understand man versus animal. I guess we'll go with that.
Well, there's a great unity there that I think is most of the time either ignored or just missed altogether. It's a very narrow segment, life on Earth. You know, if you got in a rocket ship and you traveled until literally the end of time, until the universe either died a cold death or a hot death and just vanished.
Don't know which I like better.
Wouldn't matter, because your chances of encountering life, let alone intelligent life, are statistically zero. You might catch a signal on your way from some civilization that had been gone for a couple of billion years, whose star had already burned out. But it's mostly empty space, and you'll never run into another thing with a face. You won't see that. If you want to look at faces, you're here. And so everything we have is really, really precious. Really precious.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for coming on. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.